Hey everyone, Margarita here. I want to talk in this video a little bit more extended on the last one that I did, pertaining more to how I had to raise myself, parent myself, provide for myself, and love the work that I do in order to allow my life to run with all of the toxicity that my mother had created within my household growing up, and me branching off on my own right when I turned 18 and bought my own home and got myself to safety finally after all those years of suffering, walking on eggshells, living in survival mode. It was a very big shift, a very big change when I jumped right into my own home, where I had an immediate sense of relief that I had never experienced in my life, because my mother was committing so many crimes. She had such deranged, toxic behavior with poisoning all the batches of food that she was doing, her being able to get away with it, me not being able to tell anybody, me not having a proper support system, no siblings, no living grandparents, no one to turn to for help. And she made sure that if I attempted to try to tell somebody along the way, that they would never believe me, which is why she began placing all those delusional phone calls to all of my teachers. And then it turned into all of these agencies and other people down the line once I was in my own home, and she did all this behind the scenes. So, because all that was my situation, and I knew at age 10 I needed to break free and move into my own home and build my own life separately. And I knew that I wasn't going to be able to begin my life until I was safe in my own home. She had created so much disaster along the way, so many problems. She had every intention of making sure that I was kicked out of school. That was the long-term intention, and or locked up in prison, doing long-term jail time, or deemed mentally incompetent on paper. That was her plan from the time I had started school, from around the time I had confronted her about poisoning the food, because her intention was to make sure that the trust fund that was left for me goes to her. She needed one of those situations to happen in order for her to gain access to this trust fund. So her behavior remained that toxic, day in and day out the entire time I was growing up. I barely got myself into my own home. I was so exhausted and sick of being in fight or flight mode and sick of walking on eggshells. When I finally got there, I had such a great sense of relief. I didn't even know what to do with myself. And actually, now that I know what I know and now that things have played out, the harassment never stopped. Those delusional phone calls never stopped. She continued it on immediately upon me getting into my own home. I was not aware of this. I did not begin to figure this out until around the 2013 escapade, where she destroyed literally every aspect of my life. I was left starting over from square one, all over from nothing. I already did a video on that. I already released it, and I think it's labeled "The 2013 Escapade Began at St. Roch's Catholic Church." So from 2002 to 2013, I was totally unaware of how serious the situation really was. Now, because she continued on this toxic behavior, but in a different manner, because then we had no contact, no relationship, I cut all contact with her immediately. And then she never told anybody that that's what I did. She continued on with an even bigger false narrative as if she was a part of my life, made all these hundreds or thousands of people believe that I'm just this mental disorder drug addict who ran off, when here I was fighting to have freedom and safety and be in my own home. And that's all I was focused on at that time. And she made all these hundreds or over 1,000 people, I'm sure, believe this entire false narrative about me, and continued it on and grew it for decades to where it is today. And I'm 41 years old. This is 2025. So she was able to pull all of that off. I just was not aware why I was having all these excessive problems along the way. I wasn't aware how extreme her behavior was. All I could focus on was getting myself to safety. And then at that same time, I had been gainfully employed. I had always made really good money. From the time I was 16 on, I always had been making really good money. So I had never gone without. My children had never gone without. They don't even know what it's like to go without. So that it's a pretty sick situation because I see how they act even today, and today two of them are adults. They've never once had to go through anything close to what I went through. So, I mean, the situation, when I first got into my new home at 18, I was in such extreme like mental and emotional distress because I felt like I had barely escaped. Like by the hair on my neck, I barely escaped. Like such a disaster staying there, and the excessive abuse, the poisoning of the food, all the problems this woman was creating, and I broke free barely. And I do believe that that extreme nature of what all went on at that time and me moving into my house is part of what caused my memories to like I lost a few years of memories, and it was around that time where I lost those memories for a few years, and those later came back down the line once I had the brain injury. I believe that all happened because I was in such extreme distress at that time. And then I also moved in having my first child. I was in labor moving in. So I went right into a whole other chaotic situation. That child screamed for about 12, 14 hours a night, every night, started at about 3 weeks old, and it went on until he was 13 months old. So that was that was probably part of why I lost my memories as well. I went right into still maintaining my income and working the way I was, but I was also a full time student for an entire year at Dorsey Business School. And I was paying my own bills. I was taking care of this baby. I went from one extreme disaster to another. And then once I was moved in with that child's father, he moved in with me. Everything was mine. That was my home. Everything was in my name. And he was barely contributing anything and then using more than what he was bringing in. He became physically abusive, and I went right from one disaster to another. So I really didn't fully get relaxed and free for about another year after I had moved into my home. But, you know, I had to learn how to parent myself because at this point I knew there would not be any contact with my mother. I knew there would never be a relationship. I had no intention on ever talking to her again. And the only reason there was some brief contact here and there along the way was because I maintained a separate relationship with my dad all of these years. He would just come to all of my houses with me and my kids. And he was allowed to leave with my older two kids once they got a little bit older. They weren't newborns, but eventually he was allowed to leave with them. I just did not realize how extreme my mother's behavior actually was, or I wouldn't have allowed them to go to their house in the manner in which I did. Now, they did not babysit all of the time. It wasn't my mom doing it. It was my dad when they did. But it was not a constant situation. I had other people that were helping me all along the way. They did not raise my kids. They did not grow up at their house. They lived with me the entire time. I had custody the entire time. And I had many different sets of people who helped watch my older two kids all along the way. So those kids, they did go with my dad sometimes. And there was some permanent damage done to them by me allowing my dad to take those kids to his home where my mother was. And then I had been through so much distress, and I had been gone, and everything was so chaotic for a couple of years before my kids were really going over there regularly, that I didn't fully really remember how the extreme it was, and all of the full reasons I had left in the manner in which I did and what was all actually going on. It took some years for this all to kind of come back to me, come out. And then my mother created more disasters, and that's what kind of let me know, like, oh my gosh, like you are doing the wrong thing by letting your kids around her. And I was unaware that she was spreading a false narrative with hundreds of people at that time. I did not figure this out for a while. So, me getting into my first home, yes, I had to learn how to parent myself. I was 18, and then I had a newborn baby, and I didn't have help. There was no internet, I didn't have a support system. So what does an 18-year-old do with a newborn baby and like doesn't have help or, all of the knowledge to care for a newborn baby, because I'm also an only child. But I did take babysitting classes when I was 11 or 12, and I did have a babysitting service. So I wasn't totally clueless. But to have this baby that was with me the majority of the time I'm not sleeping well because I'm also a full-time student and I'm working about 30 hours a week as well, paying all my own bills. I have a mortgage. It was a lot. It was a lot to be thrown into, but because of the amount of distress I was in as a minor living at my parents' house with everything my mother was doing to me, all of that abuse, I was actually in a better place dealing with the extreme circumstances I was dealing with in my own home with this newborn baby and having all these responsibilities. What made it worse is that the baby was screaming for quite some time. That went on for about a year. That was extremely distressful. Hold on one second. Okay, so yeah, so like moving into my own home, having a new baby, it was a lot. It was such a problem that the baby was screaming and I was not sleeping. I actually did not sleep right for about 2 years. Um, and I will get into this way down the line because I'm nowhere near talking about some of the things I have to talk about, some of the answers I have for a lot of people out there that need the information that I have. But none of that was necessary. There were causes to some of this, and I mentioned these things to my son's pediatrician at that time. And I actually knew what I was talking about. He tried to convince me that I was wrong, and then he later admitted that I was right. And because I didn't have a support system or somebody there with me, um, he was able to like sway me to do things that I didn't really want to do, and it caused additional problems, and then caused these additional problems with my new baby. So, which then in turn caused additional problems within my life when I was already in a very fragile situation, not really having anywhere to turn, no support system, and it was just a really shitty situation. So when I get to that portion of me talking about that, I will go fully in depth about all of that, because I have facts that the rest of the world is looking for. These are straight up facts. This stuff all happened in front of my face. This is not some minor issue. It's not, oh, this, oh, that. I will talk about this down the line. And so when all that happened, it was just a very chaotic time. And I went on not sleeping well. I did end up graduating Dorsey Business School. And then I just started working more. I worked different hours where I was making plenty more money because for that first year, I wasn't able to make quite as much as I'd made before. And I just had to take, in order to finish that schooling, in order to take care of the baby and do the things I was doing. That 1 year I had to make a little less money. And then I went right back to making, about $1,000 a week, probably at around that time going forward or more going forward. But I did have to take that brief period where I made a little bit less money because of all the circumstances. Now, at the same time, I'm learning what to do with a newborn baby. I'm also parenting myself because I don't have like a proper parenting system. My mother was not a normal mother. She was never neurotypical. All along the way, all these different people saying, oh, she'll come around once the baby's born, or oh, you need a support system. Oh, it'll be okay. And from day one, I knew that was never going to be the situation. From day one, I knew exactly how she operated, what the outcome was going to be, what her behavior was going to be, and I was 100% correct. At no time was I ever wrong. All of these people were wrong in telling me what they were telling me. They were all assuming that she's a neurotypical individual. Even some of these people who knew her and were her friends. And I already knew that that's not how she is. That's not how she operates. That's not what's going to be going on. And it went exactly how I thought it would, which is exactly why she was removed from my life permanently from that point forward. So doing all that, I had to, like I said in the last video, I had to make sure that, bottom line, my bills are paid because I don't have anywhere to turn. I don't have a support system. I'm not starting over. I don't have anywhere to fall back on like regular people with neurotypical parents. You can't just return home. If that was the case, I would have never left in the first place. So I had to make sure that my money is straight all the time, that my income is straight all the time. Bottom line, no matter what happens, that has to flow no matter what. So I continued to make that happen my entire life. From the time I was always making money. Even when I was 11, 12, I still made money, even though I didn't start working in restaurants until I was 14. I made good money from 16 on, continuously, nonstop. So that's, as I was parenting myself at one point, I even grabbed a sheet of paper. I wrote some things down on how I need to change this about my behavior or that about maybe my behavior, or how to, do certain things or not do certain things. And I would always have I have a bill book. I still have one today. I have everything written out 6 to 12 months in advance. And it's always been that way. So every week I pay what I need to pay every week. It's all there, and I make it so it gets paid ahead. Certain things get paid ahead. Things are a little different now with where I'm shifting things and how I'm doing things currently, because things are shifting and everything I have going on. And part of that is due to my mother's ongoing crimes, harassment, the people and agencies who have helped her, and my injury. So it will all still work out. It's just things have to be restructured and reorganized to flow forward, which I'm very close to getting all in order currently. But my bill book I have carried around since I was 17 years old. Um, and I made sure that I made what I needed every week, and I would pay everything that I needed to pay before anything else. It didn't matter if there wasn't one extra dollar, there wasn't one extra dollar. That wasn't normally the situation, but I'm just saying, like, the way I structured the bills on paper, I made sure each week and how I structured it was paid each week, even if it meant it was ahead. And even if there was only $20 left at the end, that's how it would go. But it wasn't really like that. It was usually quite a bit more than that. But I'm just saying, if, like, worst case scenario, that's how I ran things. That was my mentality behind it all. Because bottom line, I can't let anything get messed up because of my mother's criminal actions, the harassment, the behavior. There's no turning back. Now, due to all of that as well, I also could not enter into a relationship with somebody properly because of how high up on the chain I was at such a young age. And then I only built forward and higher from there. And people that are that young aren't in the mentality that I'm in. And I was literally a full blown adult mentally way before I turned 18, due to my mother's crimes, the harassment, the abuse, the behavior. I had to think like a full blown adult. And then once I was in my own home with a mortgage and a baby, I was a full blown adult, mentally, physically, emotionally, the whole 9 yards. So finding somebody else to like match where I was at that time, or any point from that point to where I am today, it's not really possible to do because I was always so advanced with everything I had going on, how I had my life structured. And because I can't make any mistakes, and I can't enter into a relationship with somebody who is going to like render me helpless or think that they're going to control all the money, or I do that on my own. I don't need to do that with somebody. Um, so, entering into a relationship most likely would cause me more harm than good at any point from the time I was 18 to the current day, because of how I have to run things, how there isn't room for error, and then how my mother uses situations to blow my life apart. So, entering into a relationship with somebody was really not like in the scope of able to happen at any point. Especially with how advanced I was, there was just I was not gonna be finding anybody near my level. And the older I got, and the more I built, and the more advanced I became along the way, that became even harder every step of the way because I'm only building and building and building. Um, so I did date like some people. Like I guess you could say there was probably like 2 or 3 people as an adult that I actually dated. You can't really count my ex, my 2 kids' dad. You cannot really count him because that was a forced relationship. When we had our daughter, who's now 20, we were not together. I raised my other son and her together by myself. He was not in the picture. He did not become in the picture till she was almost 10 years old, and that was due to my mother's crimes and escapades, where we then got forced to work together, where I then had another child and became permanently brain damaged having that child, and lost a lot of time and money, and became further injured due to all of that. It was not a relationship that I entered into willingly. With what she had caused in 2013, that was part of the fallout. Um, so even if you looked at what was going on during that time frame, it was still not a proper relationship. He was not building with me. He was causing more problems and taking from what I was doing and causing setbacks. which is exactly why I don't enter into relationships with people. But there was just too many extreme circumstances that ended up forcing us to be together and then force us to be together longer than it should have happened for. So I wouldn't really count that, but there was a couple other people that I dated for like maybe a year and a half or so. Prior to that, in my 20s, my mother had never met these people. I think my mother crossed paths with one of them briefly for a brief second, but it wasn't something that was like she was not allowed to know anything about my life, any parts of my life whatsoever. So, bringing somebody into what I do, it's a liability because of how I build success, what I've been out here doing, how I've built alone. There other people cause issues and start to take me out in one way, shape, or form because they're not as advanced as me, or they're not building anything, they're not going anywhere. I have had to rebuild and rebuild and rebuild to be where I am today. So if I had not been wiped out, I would own like somewhere between 5 and 7 houses currently and still have this house that I live in, and have a flow of money and not have to lift a finger to make all of that happen is where I would be. And so I would have a net worth of like several $1,000,000 at this point had those incidences not have happened. But entering into a relationship was something I never had time for. Again, I had to make sure my bills were paid. So all of my bills, I stayed working all of the time, my numerous streams of income. I worked double and triple time for about a 10-year period, what a regular person would, between my different businesses and my different lines of work. I did all of that in order to build that far forward to provide my kids the best life possible, all for my mother to, destroy it once I was in my early 30s and I got into this home, to destroy what I had rebuilt and rebuilt and rebuilt and was rebuilding again. And she did that by preventing treatment in the extreme medical emergency as a Beaumont Hospital employee. And that played a major role in the outcome of our injuries and how severely injured we are today. So that caused quite a lot of problems, a huge setback, years of loss of life and quality of life, years of pain and suffering. She still managed to pull all this off from behind the scenes without being directly in the mix of all of it. But to bring another person in on what I'm doing is very hard to do because most people are not goal oriented. They're not building anything. They're not on the level that I'm on. They have places to fall back to. Like with me, it's more of a liability because the other person is most likely not going to be as advanced. There's a lot of like, what do you call it? Like narcissism, personality disorders, and such. There's a lot of that going on, in this day and age. And I don't have time for that. I don't have room for that. There's no room for error. There's no room for games. There's no room for like this or that. I literally stay focused on my money. The other thing is I only date soulmates. So, and because I cross paths with a lot of people, because I work with the general public, yeah, I've met a lot of soulmates. But you'd have to meet certain criteria to even be considered to be dating me. And because I worked in the adult entertainment industry for 17 years, a lot of people don't want to view the reality of the situation properly because there are different dancers that do different things. Not everybody is just dancing out here. But that industry alone would provide quite a bit of income for me when I was in that industry. And I'd usually have another form of income or two other forms of income at the same time I'd be doing that prior to my injury. So I would have to juggle all of those and manage my kids, my two older kids. I drove them to school for it was about 10 years. I drove them and picked them up every day for about 10 years, until I had my younger baby and became brain damaged having him. So I did all of that every step of the way. And with the entertainment industry being a part of my life, if I wanted to just go out with somebody, the opportunities are always there. If I just wanted to go out with somebody the opportunity was always, right there at my feet if I so chose. That's not something I regularly did, although I've been out many times with many different people, especially the people who are travelers just visiting the area. They're from somewhere else. Usually it would be people like that I would like take them out, show them around town and stuff like that. But you would have to meet certain criteria for me to even consider going to dinner with you. And that's still few and far between. So my life was ran very different, and there wasn't a need to bring in like a significant other or a boyfriend or risk everything I'm building to bring someone into. I literally kept everything separate and kept it compartmentalized the entire time. It was my life was never mixed with my lines of work or the adult entertainment industry or any of the people I met in that industry. My life was never mixed up in between any of it, and I kept it all separate. And if I did go out with people from time to time, most of the time we wouldn't even exchange numbers. It would literally, if they were just here for like one time and they knew where they weren't coming back, then we would just hang out once, or I'd take them out here or there or show them around depending on what they're into. And now I guess you could say most of this is before my injury, maybe a little bit after, but most of this I'm talking about like before I became injured, because once I was injured, my capacity is extremely limited. I don't have as much time, and I'm not able to go out the way I used to. So, um, yeah, like there was no need to have a significant other when I provide enough income that would be like a two-person household income. I provide that on my own. I always have, and there's no reason to risk what I've been building and what I'm still building and all the losses I've already taken. There isn't room for error. So, I would just go out when I wanted to. And, there's times I would go out outside of meeting people at work, because that's not usually where I meet people. But let's just say I would go somewhere and meet someone. Usually I would go out by myself and I would meet strangers and hang out with strangers. Still, don't really exchange numbers most of the time because I don't have the availability to incorporate all of this into my life. Now, there's a handful of people where, yeah, we've exchanged numbers and such, but it's not usually something that I do. My life was very fast paced for about 15 years, extremely fast paced. My life was in fast forward, and I had to juggle so many things that there just was not room for me to even think. I just had to make sure that I kept things running, that the income stayed flowing, and I was trying to get things to a certain degree so I could finally relax. And as I was doing this, my mother had ripped out the rug from under me, caused catastrophic wipeouts, and I had been wiped out two significant times at the time when I was getting ready to make my next big move and be situated, like completely situated where I could then relax. And then she destroyed it all from behind the scenes, two separate times. So I don't want to jinx it or anything, but I am getting very close to where things may be able to flow soon. I am picking up the pieces to a 10-year catastrophic injury right now. I did not know if I was ever going, at first, I didn't know I was going to live. I didn't know if I was going to ever be able to work again. I didn't know if I was going to be able to generate any money. I didn't know if my life plans were going to be able to be carried out. I didn't know. I wasn't sure what was going to happen because I was so sick and injured, and I was not, with all the treatment. I took hundreds of thousands of dollars in treatment to get me to where I am, to where I can live more comfortably and begin to pick up pieces of my life. Um, so yeah, that's kind of like where I have things, and it's just got to stay that way. The other problem is because my mother had controlled like who I could be friends with or who I could talk to when I was a minor. Going into adulthood, I didn't have tons of people who had my back. I had to go out and meet new people along the way. But because the harassment and the crimes and all the wipeouts and the delusional phone call placing, all these problems from behind the scenes, because that was all still going on along the way, that caused me to be so caught up in fixing things and refixing things and rebuilding things, getting things back in order over and over and over for no reason other than the fact that she's jealous and envious, and wants to cause catastrophic disasters in my life. That then put a damper on me being around like-minded individuals just as like acquaintances or friends. I wasn't able to be around like-minded individuals because here I was constantly being wiped out, constant harassment, constant problems, and running in circles, chasing my tail in circles. My kids repeatedly getting kidnapped by my deranged mother, all these problems. So that prevented me from being able to build a network of people that belong in my circle who are like-minded, where we could maybe build together, or we could partner up in this manner or that manner, or for this business or that business, or have someone to lean on. That was never able to happen for me because of how my mother is still doing this to this day. It has gone on every step of the way. Because of all that chaos, there was no room for that to fit in either. Once I became injured, there definitely wasn't room. I was so sick and injured. I couldn't even be around like minimally the people in my home. It got so bad because I could not have sound. I couldn't have sound. I was so messed up. I was literally incapacitated for about 3 years. And to bring somebody else into what I do, friend, boyfriend, acquaintance, no matter how you look at it, it wasn't something I could even attempt to do because of all of the chaos and destruction that was constantly going on. So I had to learn how to build on my own and learn how to rely only on myself and learn how to use minimal resources and minimally ask for help if it was absolutely necessary, or minimally hire people here or there if it was absolutely necessary. I had to learn how to go about life a lot differently than the rest of the world. And it was much safer, much easier, much more secure, just building by myself and keeping everybody else at a distance. And even with what has gone on with the manipulation of my older two kids, they're supposed to be on my team, and currently they are not on my team. They're manipulated against me and what I had planned for all of us, that I'm still building by myself. So I'm not sure if that will ever change. But because my mother does not have access to my youngest child, and he has been sheltered from all of this destruction that she has caused, he's a lot different, and I have not allowed him to be manipulated by anybody. So he is being trained to walk in my footsteps and help carry out my plans. Also, my home, this home, is half of it is in his name. So should something happen to me, he then inherits everything that I have going on. And then he would be set for life at that point. So going forward, that's what I've been building and working towards, because everything was completely wiped out and destroyed so many times along the way. I legitimately had to learn how to love myself, parent myself, raise myself while raising my two older kids. I had to learn how to put myself first all of the time. No matter what the situation is, myself has to come first, because I'm responsible for all these minor children, and I'm responsible for not letting the house of cards crash, because I don't have anywhere to turn. I don't have a support system. I don't have a proper mother. Even though I have a normal father, he was still married to the deranged lunatic, and they still are married today, except for he is now permanently injured and at a care facility where my mother is still creating many problems. So that is why we kept a separate relationship with my dad, and he was just always allowed at my homes, and my mother never was, and that's how it's always had to be. And I'm not sure why he didn't think that this was abnormal. Um, I believe part of the reason is because she was repeating delusions to him all the time, which I do think she is still doing. And that caused him to think differently, a little bit different than what reality actually is, even though he saw reality for years on end. Um, so yeah, it's caused a lot of problems. Her behavior, the destruction, everything that's gone on, it's caused many, many problems along the way. And I have been through so much. It's amazing that I'm even still standing. It's amazing that I even still have this home left. It's amazing that I'm even going to be able to pick up the pieces with everything that has happened, because I was literally against all odds, and I've been against all odds my entire life. So that is the reason my channel is called Against All Odds, and the story is called Against All Odds, because I'm literally against all odds. I have been all along. Now, I will get more into me working directly for God Himself. Some people thought that that was a joke. I bet you they're not laughing now. I will talk about that separately in a different video. But yeah, I wanted to talk about how I had to learn how to raise myself, learn how to put my own rules in place and live by those rules and build success by the rules that I figured out how the world worked. Because what they're teaching in school, what they're teaching in college is not how you build success. It's meant for you to stay trapped in a system. You're never going to build wealth. You're never going to get ahead. And I realized that at a very young age. Yes, I did go to some college. Yes, I did graduate Dorsey Business School. I later took some college classes down the line. Where I was at in life and what I had already figured out on my own with my own life experience and what I had already built on my own, I was so many years, decades ahead of what they were trying to teach. Right away, I realized that I'm just wasting my time because my knowledge is so much further ahead than what they are teaching. Um, so yeah, I had to learn all of that on my own, and I will talk about like how to build wealth in a different video, but my mindset as a teenager and then my mindset once I got into the real world and I was experiencing everything firsthand and then I'm building success with my own money, worked my way from the ground up, never made minimum wage, always had unlimited positions where I made unlimited amounts of money and then numerous streams of income. I was able to beat the entire system. I don't live in the matrix. I live outside of the matrix. I have for a long time. This is not new. But I do have to use parts of it to make my world go round, especially because of how injured and sick I am. I do have to use parts of the matrix, but the majority of it, I am not a part of it. I weave in and out of it. I use what I have to within it, and then I hop back out into my own world. I literally generate my entire world out of my home and I build success up out of my home. And I had all these different lines of work and streams of income along the way to get me to where I am today. It's not, I didn't just wake up and get to where I am. I worked my entire life. I built from the ground up over and over and over. After each wipeout, still did it, and barely held on to everything I have left. So, doing those different streams of income along the way, I chose positions that were well paying and I chose positions that didn't have an end cap on how much money you could make. And I chose things that I liked doing. Every stream of income I had, I did things that I liked doing, even when I worked for somebody else at places that I worked at. I chose places that I liked to work, where those places worked for me. If it did not work for me, I did not come back. When I went to a job interview for a place like that, if it did not work for me, I was interviewing them. Little did they know I was interviewing them. I made it all work for me. All of my lines of work along the way, all my streams of income, I did things that I enjoyed doing and I was good at doing and paid high dollar amounts of money. And that is part of how I built to where I am today. You are not supposed to be going to work miserably, disliking what you're going to do and then being miserable doing it. Everything I did along the way, I had fun doing. Working in restaurants and bars, the industry, it's fun. It doesn't mean you get drunk when you go to these establishments. I guess some people can, or some people do maybe. But if you're business minded and you have a good head on your shoulders and you're building success, that's most likely not what you're doing. So yeah, I chose a bunch of different industries and lines of work where I enjoyed everything that I was doing every step of the way. Each company I worked for, when I worked for a company, we had fun. I made good money. I liked what I was doing, or I had control over my schedule or my income in some sense. So all of the different things I've done, I enjoyed every step of the way, every stream of income. There's a lot of people who'd be like, "Oh, why do you do that?" when they find out I was a stripper before. Okay, well, why do you work in a cubicle and make $17 an hour? Like, your life must be really boring and you have yourself capped out at 17 an hour. You're never going to get anywhere in life. So, I'm just saying, because I've had a lot of people say stuff to me like, why do I do that? Or why this? Why? Well, why do you do what you do? Because I have 100% control over my income and my life and my money. And I have fun doing everything that I've done along the way. That's why I do what I do, or that's why I've done what I've done every step along the way. Um, but yeah, each industry, I had a good time working in each industry that I worked in, each business that I ran. Some of them got destroyed pretty quickly with my mother's escapades. They weren't able to continue on for very long because she creates so much chaos. It's not possible for me to juggle. Once the chaos starts going, I have to accommodate the chaos at all times at any given moment. So once that starts going, that's how I've lost all of my businesses that I previously had, is because of her criminal actions. But each thing that I did along the way, all very profitable, all fun, all in ways where you're talking to many different types of people. And, a lot of the times I'm in control of the amount of money I'm making, or the times that I work, or when I work, or there's a lot of lot of the control factors that I'm in control of and make it work for me. So that's how I went about things. And that had to stay my main priority for the majority of my adult life. And that's just how things had to be. I never saw it any other way. I was looking at it that way from the time I was about 16 on. And I slowly figured out the rest of the pieces of the world once I went out into the world, especially with all the books that I read as a young child. I had so much experience that I was able to just see the bigger picture of everything and kind of jump over all the people in the world are kind of in this little center mix over here, all scrambling around, going in circles, never going to get out of this matrix mix over here. Whereas here I was down here at like 16, jumped over all of it, jumped to the other side, and I'm building forward on the other side. I was not a part of this mix in the middle that most of the population is stuck in. So yeah, I think differently than the rest of the world, and that's because I was forced to live my life differently. I was forced to figure out how to raise myself, implement my own rules, build success on my own, figure out the entire system, beat the matrix, all of it. I'm literally 100% self-made, self-built. There is no other true definition of it other than what I have been doing, what I've been through. There's not too many people who can say that they've ever walked in my shoes. Most people have never walked in my shoes. There's very few people out there who can walk in my shoes. Not even a week. I guarantee 99% of the population cannot even walk in my shoes for 1 week with everything I've dealt with, everything I've been through. So yeah, I just wanted to talk about like all of those subjects, me having to raise myself, implement rules, like raising kids while parenting myself, figuring out the world, learning how to love myself first. I had no choice because if I'm not okay, then the income is not okay and the children are not okay. So that's not an option. So I had to come first in order to keep everything running every step of the way, which is exactly why when I became incapacitated, um, I did barely make it to the strip club to barely get the money that I needed to keep everything running during that extreme period. Even though I couldn't drive there and I had to have somebody drive me, I had to do just that and only that, and then lay here incapacitated since nobody could actually see my injury. And those people there are in a different frame of mind. They're not thinking that I'm injured. Nobody ever realized that. And that is how I kept things running, even during the most extreme circumstances. And it only went on for about a year and a half until COVID happened. And then COVID was my relief and my paid recovery and how I got to treat as much as I did and get to where I am today. But that the care for myself and the love for myself had to come first. I don't have a mother giving me that. I don't have somebody giving me equal give and take. I don't have somebody on my team that's equally yoked. It's hard to find someone to be on my team. So I had to do all of that for myself every step of the way, which makes it even harder for me to like find like-minded people where I am today at 41 years old. So yeah, I just wanted to talk about all those different subjects, and then the part about liking your form of employment, liking the work that you do. That's a given. No matter how you go about your life, you should be liking your job. Even if you work for somebody else, if you don't like your job, that's a problem, because I was never in that boat. I was temporarily in that boat for a minute, not for very long, but that's just not something that I deal with. Life is too short to spend all of your time to get X amount of dollars per week, to make money for another company, and you're only worth like, $700 a week or $1,200 a week or whatever it is. You're only worth that amount to them, and that's you telling yourself you're only worth that, and you're going to spend your whole life stuck in that boat, miserable at the place you work at. That's not something I've ever dealt with. I know a lot of people out there are dealing with that. Um, but a lot of people can take control of that if they choose to. So if I was able to do everything I did with all the cards stacked against me every step of the way, there's no reason other people can't get themselves out of that boat. But yeah, those are the things I wanted to mention in this video. I'm going to cut it right there, and I'll be back with more. Thanks. Bye.